The council chamber stretched wider than 3 football fields. Beings from 47 different worlds sat in their designated areas, some breathing oxygen, others breathing methane through specialized tubes. Ambassador Sarah Chun stood in the center of the massive room, her small human frame looking tiny beneath the towering ceiling. She had prepared for this moment for 3 years. Every word of her speech had been checked and rechecked. Every piece of evidence had been verified. Today, humanity would finally get answers about the missing ships. Sarah looked up at the circular rows of seats that rose high above her. Thousands of alien eyes stared down at her. Some looked curious. Most looked bored. A few looked annoyed that a human dared to speak at all. "Honored council members," Sarah began, her voice amplified through the chamber. "I come before you today to present evidence of a grave injustice. Over the past 2 years, 14 human colony ships have disappeared near the Vexian trade corridor. These ships carried 73,000 people, men, women, and children. They vanished without a trace." She activated the holographic display. Images of the missing ships appeared in the air above her head. Photos of families who had boarded those vessels, excited to start new lives on distant worlds. They would never arrive. "We have recovered data from emergency beacons," Sarah continued. "We have witness testimony from merchant vessels. We have tracked the ship's last known positions. All evidence points to Vexian involvement." A chittering sound came from the Vexian section. General Krathos rose from his seat. He was massive, even for his species. His insectoid body stood nearly 8 feet tall. 4 arms crossed over his armored chest. His compound eyes glittered with something that looked like amusement. "The human makes accusations," Krathos said, his voice translator making his words sound sharp and metallic. "But humans are new to space travel. Perhaps their primitive ships simply broke down. Perhaps their navigation was faulty. The Vexian Empire will not be blamed for human incompetence." Several species in the chamber made sounds that Sarah recognized as laughter. Her jaw clenched, but she maintained her composure. "General Krathos," she said firmly, "these were not accidents. The evidence clearly shows—" "Evidence?" Another voice interrupted. This came from the Zentari delegation, a species that had been allied with the Vexians for centuries. "You show us pictures and claim they prove guilt. Where are these ships? Where are the bodies? Where is your proof?" More laughter echoed through the chamber. Sarah felt her face grow hot. Behind her, she heard her aide, Rebecca Webb, whisper urgently, "Ambassador, they're not taking this seriously." Sarah knew. She had known this might happen. The Galactic Council operated on a hierarchy. Strong species commanded respect. Weak species begged for scraps. Humanity, occupying only 12 star systems, was considered very weak indeed. Council Speaker Therium finally raised one clawed hand for silence. The ancient reptilian being had led the council for over 200 years. His voice was slow and deliberate. "Ambassador Chun," he said, "the council has reviewed your petition. We find insufficient evidence to warrant an investigation into Vexian activities. Furthermore, the council reminds humanity that it does not yet hold full membership status. Your people have been granted provisional trade rights and nothing more. These constant petitions are becoming ... tiresome." Sarah's hands shook. She forced them to be still. Speaker Therium, with respect, 73,000 human lives are statistically insignificant in a galaxy of trillions. Therium interrupted. The council suggests that humanity focus on securing its own borders rather than making accusations against established empires. The dismissal was clear. Sarah was being told to shut up and sit down. Rage boiled in her chest, but she swallowed it. Losing her temper would only make things worse. "The human should leave," another voice called out. "She wastes our time." "Agreed," someone else said, the chamber filled with sounds of agreement. Sarah stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening. She had come with evidence, with testimony, with truth. And they simply did not care. General Krathos descended from his platform. His 4 legs carried him down the steps with surprising speed. He approached Sarah, towering over her. She held her ground, looking up at his massive form. "You are bold, little human," Crothus said quietly, his translator making the words sound almost gentle. "But boldness without power is just foolishness?" What happened next occurred so fast that Sarah barely registered it. Crothus's leg moved in a blur. His massive foot connected with Sarah's chest. The impact launched her across the smooth chamber floor. She tumbled and rolled, her body ragdolling across the polished surface until she finally stopped. 30 feet from where she had stood, pain exploded through Sarah's back. She tried to breathe but couldn't. Her vision went dark at the edges. Through the haze, she heard Rebecca screaming her name. Heard footsteps running toward her. The chamber had gone completely silent. Krythos turned to face the council, his voice booming through the amplifiers. "Let this remind the hairless apes what happens when prey forgets its place. The Vexian Empire has spoken." Sarah's vision faded. The last thing she saw was Rebecca's face above her, tears streaming down the younger woman's cheeks. Then everything went black. Far above Earth. In the military command center orbiting the planet, Commander Marcus Webb watched the broadcast. He watched the general kick his daughter's best friend across the floor like garbage. He watched the council do nothing. He watched as medical personnel finally rushed to help Sarah. While the alien delegates simply returned to their seats, Marcus's hands gripped, the edge of his console so hard the metal bent. Around him, every officer in the command center stared at the screens in stunned silence. "Sir," his executive officer said quietly. "Orders." Marcus didn't answer right away. He watched Speaker Therium call the session back to order. Watch them move on to the next agenda item as if nothing had happened. As if a human life meant nothing at all. "Send a message to all colonies," Marcus said, his voice cold and flat. "Initiate Protocol Omega, full communications blackout in 1 hour. No exceptions." "Sir, that's a war protocol." "I know what it is." "Do it now." The executive officer hesitated for just a moment, then nodded. "Yes, sir." Marcus leaned forward and opened a direct channel to the Galactic Council. He wanted them to hear this. Wanted them to know what was coming. "This is Commander Marcus Webb of the Human Defense Fleet," he said. "You've made a terrible mistake." He cut the transmission before anyone could respond. Around him, alarms began to sound as Protocol Omega activated across every human world. Civilian factories received new instructions. Military personnel reported to their stations. Supply lines rerouted. Defensive platforms powered up. Marcus watched Earth below. Saw the lights of cities that would soon turn their entire industrial capacity toward one goal. He thought about Sarah Chun lying broken on that chamber floor. He thought about the 73,000 missing colonists. He thought about the laughter. The galaxy thought humanity was weak. They thought humans were prey animals that could be kicked aside when convenient. They were about to learn the difference between being peaceful and being harmless. Marcus opened a channel to all human military commanders across 12 star systems. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, "we have 30 days. Make them count." The video played on every screen across human space. Sarah Chun being kicked across the council chamber floor, her body tumbling like a broken doll, the sound of alien laughter. The casual way General Krathos returned to his seat, as if he had done nothing more significant than swatting an insect. Then came Speaker Therium's ruling. The Vexian action, while unfortunate, falls within acceptable parameters given the humans' aggressive posturing. No sanctions will be applied. Humanity is hereby given 30 standard days to cease all petitions to this council or face expulsion from all trade agreements. On Earth, in the hospital where Sarah lay in critical condition, Rebecca Webb watched the broadcast replay for the 100th time, her hands clenched into fists. Sarah's spine had been fractured in 3 places. The doctors said she might never walk again without cybernetic assistance. All because she had dared to ask for justice. Rebecca's personal communicator buzzed, a message from her father. "Come home, now." She took one last look at Sarah's unconscious form in the medical pod, then left the hospital. Outside, the streets of Geneva were strangely quiet. No air traffic, no commercial transports. Every screen showed the same government message: return to your homes. Await further instructions. Protocol Omega had begun. Rebecca reached the military spaceport within an hour. A shuttle waited to take her to the orbital command center where her father worked. As they ascended through Earth's atmosphere, she looked down at the planet below. Even from space, she could see the changes. Factories that had produced civilian goods for decades were already retooling. Every light, every facility, every resource was being redirected. Humanity was transforming. On Mars, factories that built terraforming equipment stopped production. New blueprints flooded their systems: warship designs, weapon specifications, armor plating. Within hours, the first components began rolling off assembly lines. On Europa Station, mining operations doubled their output. Raw materials poured into processing centers. Ice was converted into fuel. Rare metals were extracted and shipped to shipyards. Every mining colony in human space received the same orders: maximum production, no delays, no questions. In the asteroid belt, construction crews worked in shifts that never ended. Massive frames took shape in the darkness of space. Ships designed not for exploration or trade, but for one purpose only: war. The Galactic Council watched the frenzy of activity with growing unease. Intelligence reports flooded in from observers near human space, energy signatures spiking across all 12 systems. Mass mobilization of civilian populations. Communications blackout preventing any information from leaving human-controlled space. The Vexian Empire sent 3 scout ships to investigate. They approached the edge of human territory, their sensors scanning for weakness. They found something else instead. The first scout ship detected a massive debris field near the human colony of New Terra. They moved closer to investigate. The debris was the remains of an old space station scattered across a wide area. Perfect cover for an ambush, human ships emerged from the wreckage like predators. Fast attack craft, smaller than traditional Vexian vessels. They swarmed the scout ship, targeting its engines and weapon systems with precision. The Vexians never had time to call for help. Their ship went dark, then exploded. The second and third scout ships met similar fates. The Vexians sent a full military patrol next. 20 ships, heavily armed and armored. They never returned. The Council received only a brief distress call before silence. What are the humans doing? One council member asked during an emergency session. They are angry, another replied. Let them rage. They will tire themselves out and accept reality. But some council members were not so certain. The Kickster, a species that had once made the mistake of underestimating an opponent, quietly began pulling their trading vessels away from routes near human space. The Fellerin did the same. Better safe than sorry, General Krathos was not concerned. He stood in his command center aboard the Vexian flagship, reviewing reports of the lost patrol vessels. Humans got lucky, he told his officers. They use cowardly ambush tactics. When they face our true fleet, they will break. His chief strategist was less confident. General, the humans have gone silent. We cannot assess their true military strength. Perhaps we should request council support. Krathos' mandibles clicked in anger. Support? Against primitives? I will not show weakness before the council. The Vexian Empire will handle this minor irritation alone. He deployed 3 full battle groups to the border of human space. Over 600 ships, carrying enough firepower to level planets. Surely this would make the humans see reason. On day 28 of the 30-day deadline, the galaxy held its breath. Human space remained dark and silent, no transmissions. No diplomatic overtures, nothing. The Council sent a final message. Humanity has 48 hours to respond to Council demands or face economic sanctions and possible military intervention. No response came. On day 30, at exactly midnight Galactic Standard Time, the silence ended. Human fleets emerged from jump points across 40 different locations simultaneously. They appeared at the borders of Vexian space with military precision that shocked every observer. These were not the small defensive flotillas humanity had maintained before. These were armadas. The ships looked nothing like traditional galactic vessels. No sleek curves or aesthetic designs. They were brutal, angular, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. They looked like flying fortresses, built for one purpose: destruction. Admiral Rebecca Webb, newly promoted despite her young age, stood on the bridge of the UHSF Retribution. Around her, dozens of screens showed tactical data streaming in from across the fleet. She thought about Sarah, still in the hospital, still recovering. She thought about the 73,000 missing colonists. All ships, she said into the fleet-wide channel. Weapons free, no quarter, no mercy. The human fleet surged forward. The Vexian border fortresses had stood for 800 years. Massive structures bristling with defensive weapons, each one capable of holding off an entire fleet. The Vexians had always believed them to be impregnable. They learned otherwise within 3 hours. Human ships didn't engage in traditional fleet tactics. They deployed thousands of automated drones that swarmed the fortresses like angry hornets. While the Vexian defenses focused on the drones, human destroyers slipped through the chaos and delivered payloads of kinetic penetrators directly into the fortress cores. The first fortress exploded in a bloom of fire visible for light years. The second fell 20 minutes later. By the end of the first day, all 17 border fortresses were nothing but debris. General Krathus watched the reports with growing disbelief. How? How are they doing this? His strategist had no answers. They fight like nothing we've encountered before. They don't follow standard tactical doctrine. They're using weapon systems we don't recognize, strategies we don't understand. Krathus opened a channel to the council. I require immediate military assistance. The human threat is more significant than anticipated. The council chamber erupted in chaos. Some members wanted to help. Others were too shocked to respond. A few quietly suggested that perhaps the Vexians had brought this on themselves. Commander Marcus Webb broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. His face appeared on every screen capable of receiving galactic transmissions. You kicked a diplomat, he said, his voice calm but his eyes burning with cold fury. We're kicking down your empire. To every species watching this, take note. This is what happens when you mistake peace for weakness. We gave you civilization. You spat in our faces. Now you get the monsters underneath. The transmission ended. The galaxy watched in horror as human fleets pushed deeper into Vexian space, destroying everything in their path. The predators had become prey. And the prey had revealed itself to be the apex predator all along. The war was 3 weeks old when the Galactic Council realized they had fundamentally misunderstood what humans were. General Krathus stood in his command center, watching another of his fleets get torn apart. The Vexian forces outnumbered the humans 3-1. They had superior shields, faster engines, and weapons that had won wars for centuries. None of it mattered. The humans didn't fight like galactic species fought. There were no grand fleet battles where ships lined up and traded fire until one side retreated. There was no honor, no rules, no mercy. They're gone again, his tactical officer reported. The entire human strike force just vanished. Where? Krathus demanded. Unknown, General? They jumped out before we could track their trajectory. Krathus slammed a fist against his console. This was the 5th time this week. Human ships would appear, hit hard and fast, then disappear before the Vexians could mount an effective counterattack. They were fighting like cowards, using hit-and-run tactics that no honorable military would employ. What Krathus didn't understand was that humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They had learned every dirty trick, every brutal strategy, every method of warfare that worked regardless of honor. Guerrilla tactics, psychological operations, total war. The Vexians were learning all of these lessons at once. 3 systems deep into Vexian space, Commander Marcus Webb stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical map. Red icons showed Vexian positions. Blue showed human forces. But there were also green icons scattered throughout the display. Those were the mines. Are they in position? He asked his weapons officer. Yes, sir. We've seeded the entire gravity well with proximity mines. The Vexian fleet won't see them until it's too late. Marcus nodded. The mines were a human innovation. Small, nearly undetectable, and devastatingly effective. The galaxy's navies had never needed them because they fought wars in open space, ship against ship. Humans had learned centuries ago that the battlefield itself could be a weapon. Send the bait, he ordered, a single human destroyer. Accelerated toward the Vexian fleet waiting. On the other side of the system, it fired a few shots, then turned and ran. The Vexians, eager for an easy kill, gave chase. Their entire fleet moved forward. Sensors locked on the fleeing destroyer. They never saw the mines until the first. Explosions rippled through their formation. Ships detonated in chains, each explosion triggering proximity mines nearby. In less than 10 minutes, 60 Vexian warships were gone. The survivors retreated in panic. Marcus allowed himself a cold smile. Next target. Admiral Rebecca Webb commanded a different operation on the far side of Vexian space. Her mission was supply lines. While Marcus destroyed military forces, she was destroying the Empire's ability to support those forces. Target the refueling depot, she ordered. Her tactical officer hesitated. Admiral, that's a civilian facility. There are non-combatants there. Rebecca's expression hardened. She thought about Sarah, still in physical therapy, learning to walk again. Did the Vexians care about our civilians on those colony ships? Did they show mercy to 73,000 people? Fire. The depot exploded. Without fuel, the Vexian fleet would be stranded. Without food shipments, their colonies would starve. This was total war, and humans had learned long ago that wars were won not just by destroying armies, but by breaking the enemy's will to fight. The Galactic Council watched in horror. This was not how civilized species conducted warfare. There were rules, agreements, protocols about acceptable targets and acceptable casualties. Humans seemed completely unaware of these rules, or more likely they simply didn't care. We must stop this, Council Speaker Therium declared. The humans have gone too far. You allowed the Vexians to kick their ambassador, the Kickster representative replied. You laughed when they presented evidence of murdered colonists. Did you expect them to simply accept this treatment? We expected them to be reasonable. They are being reasonable, the Kickster said quietly. They are responding proportionally to the threat. The Vexians made humans their enemy. Now they are learning what human enemies look like. But the Council could not allow this to continue. 12 species voted to form an intervention fleet. Thousands of ships from across the galaxy would combine their forces to stop humanity by overwhelming military might. Surely even humans would back down when faced with such power. They did not understand humans at all. The intervention fleet gathered at Proxima Threshold, a strategic system between Vexian and human space. It was the largest military gathering in 3,000 years. 5,000 warships from 12 different species, all united to stop humanity's rampage. Admiral Chun, Sarah's cousin and a decorated fleet commander, received the report about the intervention force. He studied the numbers, the ship classes, the tactical formations. On paper, it was impossible. The humans were outnumbered 50-1. Sir, his executive officer said carefully, we should request reinforcement. These odds are— I know what the odds are, Admiral Chun interrupted. And I know what the Council is thinking. They believe overwhelming force will make us negotiate. They still don't understand. He opened a channel to Commander Webb. Marcus, are you seeing this? I see it, Marcus replied. How do you want to play this? We show them why predators avoid humans on Earth. We show them what happens when you corner the scariest thing on the planet. We go Hellfire. There was a pause. Hellfire doctrine was the last resort. Every weapon humanity had ever invented or imagined. No restrictions. No holding back. The kind of warfare that had once threatened to destroy Earth itself. Are you sure? Marcus asked. Admiral Chun looked at a photo on his desk. Sarah, in her ambassador uniform, smiling before her presentation to the Council. Before Krythos had broken her body and the Council had laughed. I'm sure. Let's teach them fear. The Battle of Proxima Threshold began with the intervention fleet's commander offering humanity one last chance to surrender. Admiral Chien's response was to launch every missile his fleet carried. The Council's forces were prepared for conventional warfare. They were not prepared for what came next. Nuclear warheads, banned in galactic warfare for 2,000 years, detonated throughout the intervention fleet. The primitive weapons were supposed to be ineffective against modern shields. Humans had made modifications. The yield had been increased. The delivery systems had been improved. The explosions overwhelmed shield generators that had never been designed to handle such raw, brutal force. Then came the kinetic weapons. Simple metal rods accelerated to near-light speed. They punched through shields and armor like paper. One rod could split a ship in half. Humans launched thousands. Then the biological weapons. Engineered viruses designed to target specific alien physiologies. Released through micro-drones that infiltrated the intervention fleet's ventilation systems. Within hours, ships reported crew members collapsing. Then the chemical weapons. Corrosive agents that ate through hull plating. Nerve agents that killed through environmental suits. Humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of killing other humans. Using these weapons on aliens was almost trivial by comparison. The intervention fleet, so confident in its technological superiority, began to disintegrate. Ships fled in every direction. Some surrendered. Most were destroyed before they could escape. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, only 3% of the intervention fleet survived. The galaxy watched the aftermath in stunned silence. The battle had been broadcast by automated observers, as was Council tradition. They had wanted the galaxy to see humanity be humbled. Instead, they had shown the galaxy that humans were the most dangerous species in known space. In the Council chamber, representatives from 47 worlds sat in shock. Some were angry. Some were terrified. All were recalculating their relationship with humanity. What have we done? Someone whispered. Council Speaker Therium had no answer. He stared at the casualty reports, at the images of burning ships, at the transmission from Admiral Chun that had accompanied the destruction. You wanted to see what happens when you push humans too far. Now you know. Stand aside or join the Vexians in oblivion. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Council had no idea what to do. The war had lasted 6 months. 6 months that changed the galaxy forever. General Krythus stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his empire burn. What had once been 300 star systems was now reduced to less than 50. Human fleets moved through Vexian space like a plague, destroying military installations, crippling infrastructure, and dismantling centuries of imperial power. General, his communications officer said hesitantly. Another distress call from the mining colonies in the Tertius sector. They're requesting evacuation support. We have no ships to spare, Krathus replied, his voice hollow. Tell them to evacuate using civilian transports. Sir, the humans have been targeting civilian transports. Krathos' mandibles clicked in frustration. That violates the Galactic Convention on... The humans don't recognize the convention, sir. They never signed it. Of course they hadn't. Humanity had never been given the chance to sign it. They had been kept on the outside, treated as lesser beings, denied the protections and rights that other species took for granted. Now those same species were learning that rules only work when everyone agrees to follow them. Commander Marcus Webb studied the intelligence reports coming from deep within Vexian territory. His analysts had found something that made his blood run cold even after 6 months of war. Are you certain? He asked. The intelligence officer nodded. Yes, sir. We've confirmed it through 3 independent sources. The missing colony ships. They're here. Marcus looked at the coordinates. A remote system, far from the major trade routes, hidden, secret. He activated the fleet-wide channel. All commanders, Priority 1 tasking. We found our people. The human fleet converged on the Vexian prison system within 18 hours. What they found there would haunt them for years to come. The colony ships had been taken apart, their valuable components salvaged. The colonists had been imprisoned in labor camps on a barren moon. 73,000 people. At least, that's how many had been taken. Only 42,000 remained alive. Admiral Rebecca Webb led the rescue operation personally. She walked through the camps, seeing humans in ragged clothes, starved and beaten, working in mines that extracted rare minerals for the Vexian war machine. Children who should have been in school had been forced to work alongside their parents. Families had been separated. Many had died from exhaustion, disease, or casual brutality from Vexian guards. Rebecca found a little girl, maybe 7 years old, sitting alone in one of the barracks. The girl looked up at her with hollow eyes. "Are you real?" The girl whispered. "Or am I dreaming again?" Rebecca knelt down, taking the girl's hand gently. "I'm real. We're all real. We're taking you home." The girl began to cry. Rebecca held her, feeling her own tears fall. Behind her, Marines were securing the camps, providing medical attention, distributing food and water. Some colonists were too weak to walk. Others couldn't believe they were being rescued. Many had given up hope months ago. The Vexian guards were captured and placed in detention. The camp commandant tried to defend his actions. "We were following orders," he insisted. "These were prisoners of war. We treated them according to—" Marcus stepped forward and hit the commandant so hard his mandibles cracked. "They were civilians, families. You worked children to death in mines." The commandant said nothing more. Marcus recorded everything. Every testimony from survivors. Every image of the camps. Every body in the mass graves. Then he broadcast it to the entire galaxy. The council needed to see what their inaction had caused. They needed to understand why humanity would not stop, would not negotiate, would not forgive. The broadcast shocked the galaxy. Species that had dismissed human complaints as exaggerations saw the truth. The missing colonists had not simply disappeared. They had been enslaved, worked to death, murdered. And the council had done nothing when humanity had begged for help. Public opinion shifted. Many species that had supported the intervention fleet now demanded their governments cease hostilities with humanity. Protests erupted on dozens of worlds. How could the council side with slavers and murderers? The council tried to spin the revelation. "We did not know," Council Speaker Therium claimed. "The Vexians deceived us all." Admiral Chun's response was broadcast galaxy-wide. "You didn't know because you didn't care to know. We told you our people were missing. We showed you evidence. You laughed and kicked our ambassador across the floor. The only thing you didn't know was that we would make you pay for it." The war continued, but now with the full knowledge of what was at stake. Humanity's rage, which had seemed excessive to many galactic observers, now seemed justified. Even inevitable, General Krathus watched his empire's final systems fall to human assault. His fleet was shattered. His colonies were abandoned. His economy was in ruins. He had believed humans were prey. He had been catastrophically wrong. "General," his aide said quietly, "the Council has refused our latest request for support." "We are alone?" Krathus felt something he had never experienced before, fear, true existential fear. "Then we fight to the last." "Sir, perhaps we should consider surrender. The humans might show mercy if—" "Mercy?" Krathus laughed bitterly. "After what we did to their colonists? After I kicked their ambassador? They will show us exactly as much mercy as we showed them. None." But Krathus was wrong. Humans were capable of mercy. They were also capable of justice. The two were not the same thing. Commander Marcus Webb sent a transmission to the Vexian homeworld. "You have 48 hours to surrender General Krathus and all camp commandants for trial. You will dismantle your military forces and accept human oversight of your government. You will pay reparations to every family who lost someone. In exchange, we will not bombard your homeworld, and we will allow your species to survive." The Vexian Governing Council debated for 30 hours. Some wanted to fight to the end. Others saw the reality of their situation. They had lost, Completely, utterly, their only choice was, how many more Vexians would die before accepting the inevitable? General Krathos made the choice for them. He surrendered himself to human forces and ordered all remaining Vexian military units to stand down. The war was over. Krathos was brought before a human tribunal in the same council chamber where he had kicked Sarah Chun. The room was packed with observers from across the galaxy. Every species wanted to see what humanity would do with their defeated enemy. Sarah Chun, walking with a cane but walking nonetheless, presented the evidence. Every crime, every atrocity, every death. She spoke for 6 hours, her voice steady, her evidence irrefutable. When she finished, she looked directly at Krathos. You kicked me because you thought we were weak. You thought violence would make us submit? You were wrong about everything? Krathos had no defense. The evidence was overwhelming. He was found guilty on all charges. The sentence was life imprisonment, not death. Execution would have been easier. Instead, Krathos would spend the rest of his long life in a human prison, thinking about his mistakes. The galaxy watched the trial's conclusion. They saw that humans, despite their rage and capacity for violence, still believed in justice. They could have executed Krathos. They could have destroyed the Vexian homeworld. They had the power to do both. They chose not to. That choice, more than any battle, showed the galaxy what humans truly were. Not monsters, not bloodthirsty savages, but beings who believed in rules and justice, in mercy when it was earned. They had fought brutally because they had been forced to fight. Now that the war was over, they returned to being civilized. But the galaxy would never forget what happened when humanity was pushed too far. The lesson had been written in fire across a dozen star systems. It would be remembered for generations. You can kick a human, but you better make sure they don't get back up. Because if they do, nothing in the galaxy will save you from what comes next. 50 years had passed since the war ended. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The Galactic Council still existed, but it looked nothing like it had before. The old hierarchy based on military power was gone. In its place was a system that guaranteed representation for all species, regardless of size or strength. The Galactic Accord had been completely rewritten. Humans had insisted on it. Sarah Chun walked through the memorial garden on Earth, her steps steady despite her age. The cybernetic spine that had replaced her damaged one worked perfectly, but sometimes she still felt phantom pains from that day 50 years ago. The day General Krathos had kicked her across the council chamber floor, she stopped at the central monument. A massive wall of black stone, inscribed with 73,000 names. The colonists who had been taken by the Vexians. Some had survived the camps. Many had not. Every name was listed here, from the oldest to the youngest. Sarah ran her fingers over a name near the bottom. Emma Rodriguez, age 4. The little girl had died of pneumonia in the labor camps 3 weeks before the rescue. I still come here, a voice said behind her. Sarah turned to see Marcus Webb approaching. He was older now, his hair completely white, but he still walked with military precision. He had retired from active service 20 years ago, but remained an advisor to the Human Defense Fleet. I come every month, Sarah replied. To remember why it mattered. Marcus stood beside her, looking at the wall of names. Do you regret it, the war? Everything that happened? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. I regret that it was necessary. I regret every life lost on both sides. But no, I don't regret standing up when we were knocked down. If we hadn't fought back, how many more humans would be names on this wall? They stood together in silence, two people who had been at the center of the galaxy's most devastating war. Sarah had returned to diplomatic work after recovering from her injuries. She had been instrumental in negotiating the new Galactic Accord. Marcus had led the military campaign that had humbled the galaxy's greatest powers. Together, they had reshaped civilization itself. Have you heard? Marcus asked. The council voted this morning. They're making today a Galactic Remembrance Day. They're calling it the Day of Reflection. Every species is supposed to remember what happened, and why it must never happen again. Sarah smiled sadly. They're remembering the wrong lesson. They think it's about not attacking humans specifically. They should be learning not to attack anyone who can't defend themselves. Some of them understand, Marcus said. The younger generations, especially. They grew up in the new system. They see everyone as equals because that's all they've known. Sarah hoped he was right. The war had cost so much, millions dead across multiple species. Entire economies destroyed. Trauma that would echo through generations. But it had also created a galaxy where justice mattered, where the weak had protection, where might did not make right across the galaxy. Other ceremonies were taking place on the Vexian homeworld, now a client state under human protection. Young Vexians visited their own memorial. The names of Vexian soldiers who had died in the war. Their teachers told them the story of how their empire had fallen because of one act of arrogance. How General Krathus had kicked a diplomat and started a war that destroyed everything their ancestors had built. The lesson was simple. Pride and cruelty have consequences. In the council chamber. Now redesigned to place all species on equal footing, Council Speaker Therium's successor gave a speech. She was young for her species, barely 200 years. Old, and she had not been part of the old council that had dismissed humanity's pleas. We gathered today to remember our failure, she said. 50 years ago, this council failed in its most basic duty. We failed to protect the innocent. We failed to provide justice. We failed to recognize the worth of every sentient life. Because of our failure, war came. Because of our arrogance, millions died. We remember this day not to celebrate victory or mourn defeat, but to commit ourselves to never failing again. The chamber was silent. Representatives from every species stood and placed a hand over their hearts, or whatever equivalent their species had. Even the Vexian representative, a young diplomat who had not been born when the war started, participated in the remembrance. In a human prison facility on a remote station, General Krathus sat in his cell. He was old now, ancient even by Vexian standards. His once mighty body was frail, his compound eyes were dim, but his mind remained sharp, cursed with the ability to remember everything he had done. The door to his cell opened. Krathus looked up, surprised. He rarely had visitors. When he saw who it was, he struggled to his feet out of instinct, then caught himself. He had no rank anymore, no authority, no empire. "Ambassador Chung," he said, his translator making his voice sound thin and reedy, "I did not expect to see you." Sarah walked into the cell, waving off the guard who tried to accompany her. "Leave us," she told the guard. "I'll be fine." The guard hesitated but obeyed. The door closed, leaving Sarah alone with the being who had tried to break her. "Why are you here?" Krathus asked. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. He looked so small now, so diminished. It was hard to believe this frail creature had once been the commander of vast fleets, the enforcer of an empire that had ruled for centuries. "I came to tell you something," Sarah said. "In 1 week, you're being released." Krathus stared at her in shock. "What? I was sentenced to life imprisonment. You were? But you've served 50 years. You're dying. The doctors say you have less than a year left. The Human Council voted to grant you clemency. You'll be sent to a Vexian care facility where you can live out your remaining days in comfort." "Why?" Krathus demanded. "I am a war criminal. I started the war that killed millions. I enslaved your people. I kicked you. Why would you show me mercy?" Sarah walked closer, looking directly into his compound eyes. "Because that's what separates us from you. You kicked me because you thought we were weak, because you thought violence made you strong. We're releasing you because we're strong enough to show mercy even to someone who deserves none." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "But I want you to understand something, Krathus. We're showing you mercy because we choose to, not because you earned it. The galaxy learned 50 years ago that humanity can be the most dangerous thing in known space when we need to be. But we can also be the most merciful. Remember that in your final days. Remember that the species you tried to destroy is the one giving you dignity in death." Krathus said nothing. What could he say? She was right about everything. Sarah left the cell and walked down the corridor. Outside, Rebecca Webb was waiting. Rebecca had risen to become one of humanity's top admirals before retiring. Now she worked as a military historian, teaching young officers about the war and its lessons. "How did it go?" Rebecca asked. "He's still processing it," Sarah replied. "He expected execution or endless imprisonment. He can't understand why we're letting him go." "Can you understand it?" Rebecca asked. "After everything he did to you?" Sarah thought about the question. She thought about lying in the council chamber, her back broken. She thought about the months of painful recovery. She thought about the little girl in the labor camp who asked if the rescue was real. "I understand it because I have to," Sarah said finally. "If we let hate control us, then they were right about us. We really would be monsters. Showing Kratha's mercy doesn't erase what he did. It proves we're better than what he believed we were." They walked together toward the transport station. Behind them, in his cell, General Kratha sat in silence, contemplating the strange nature of the species he had tried to destroy on Earth. In the Hall of Galactic Relations, there was a museum dedicated to the war. Millions of visitors came every year from across the galaxy. They walked through exhibits showing the timeline of events. They watched recordings of the council session where Kratos kicked Ambassador Chun. They saw the evidence from the labor camps. They learned about the battles, the casualties, the cost. But the exhibit that drew the most visitors was the final room. It was a simple space with a single display. A hologram showed two scenes side by side. On the left, General Kratos kicking Sarah Chun. On the right, Sarah Chun walking into Kratos' cell 50 years later to tell him he was being released. Beneath the hologram was a single sentence. "This is the difference between revenge and justice." Young beings from across the galaxy stood in that room, trying to understand. Their teachers explained it in different ways, but the core lesson was the same. Humanity had been kicked down, they had gotten back up, they had fought with terrible fury. And when they won, they had shown mercy. That was power, true power. Not the power to destroy, though humans had proven they could do that, but the power to choose not to. The power to be better than your enemies even when you had every right to be worse. As the sun set on Earth, Sarah Chun stood in her apartment, looking out over the city. Somewhere in the sky above, human ships patrolled the trade routes, keeping them safe. Keeping everyone safe, not just humans, but all species. That was humanity's role now. The guardians, the protectors, the ones who remembered what happened when the strong preyed on the weak.